She grew up in a small place where days moved slowly and dreams often stayed quiet. The streets were familiar, the faces almost always the same. Nothing big ever happened there, and people learned early not to expect too much from life. In that place, she learned how to listen. She listened to footsteps, to wind brushing against windows, to old radios playing soft tunes late at night. Sound meant more to her than words ever did. From a young age, she was drawn to music, though she never talked much about it. While others played outside or watched television, she spent long hours sitting near an old instrument that had been passed down and barely worked properly. Some keys felt heavier than others. Some notes sounded tired, but to her it was perfect. It was honest. It didn't judge her or rush her. It waited. No one ever pushed her toward music. In fact, most people thought it was just a phase. They believed music was a hobby, not something real enough to build a future on. She heard those words often. Focus on something practical. Keep your expectations low. People like us don't end up on stages. She nodded and smiled because arguing felt useless. Inside, though something stayed awake, she practiced when no one was watching. Early mornings before the house woke up, late nights when the world went quiet, she didn't practice to impress anyone. She practiced because it helped her breathe. Each note felt like a small piece of her story, something she didn't know how to say out loud. At school and later at work, she was never the loud one. She stayed in the background, completed her tasks, and avoided attention. People described her as calm, maybe even forgettable. They didn't see the fire she carried inside because she never showed it. She learned early that standing out often came with judgment, and judgment could hurt. Still, music followed her everywhere. When life felt heavy, she imagined melodies. When things felt empty, she filled the silence with rhythm. She wrote small pieces on paper, never sharing them. They were personal, shaped by loneliness, hope, and quiet strength. Those pages stayed hidden, tucked away like secrets. One day, an announcement changed the rhythm of her life. A local event was being planned, something simple and respectful. A small performance where a few people could share talents. Nothing grand. No big audience. Just a room with chairs and soft lights. Someone suggested she should participate. At first, she laughed it off. The idea felt unreal, but the suggestion stayed with her. At night, she thought about it while staring at the ceiling. A small voice inside her whispered that maybe this was a chance. Not to become famous, not to prove anything, just to be seen even for a moment. When she finally agreed, the reaction was mixed. Some smiled politely. Others looked unsure. A few warned her gently. Don't try anything complicated. Play something easy. People like simple things. They said it as advice, but it felt like a limit. She understood their fear. If she failed, it would be uncomfortable for everyone. If she played too boldly, she might embarrass herself. Safe choices were encouraged. Safe choices were respected. She nodded again, just like she always did. Outwardly calm. Inwardly restless. As the days passed, pressure slowly grew. People asked what she would play. When she answered vaguely, they reminded her to keep it basic. They didn't mean harm. They believed they were protecting her. But each reminder felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. At home, she sat in front of the instrument, hands resting but not moving. For the first time in years, she felt unsure. The simple pieces felt empty. They didn't sound like her. They didn't carry the years of quiet effort, the nights of doubt. The strength built in silence. She tried playing them anyway. The notes came out clean but lifeless. She stopped and stared at her hands. Her fingers knew more than this. Her heart wanted more than this. Memories came back to her then. The first time she discovered how sound could change a mood, the nights she cried quietly while playing, letting music hold her together. The belief she had built piece by piece. When no one else believed for her, she realized that keeping it simple might mean hiding again. And she was tired of hiding. Still, fear did not disappear. What if they were right? What if the audience didn't understand? What if silence followed her last note instead of applause? The thought made her stomach twist. She stood up and walked away from the instrument, trying to clear her mind. Outside, the evening air was cool. Lights glowed in windows. Life went on as usual. No one knew what was happening inside her. That night, she made no final decision. She only knew one thing for sure. Whatever she played, it had to be honest. Even if it scared her, even if it changed how people saw her. As the day of the event drew closer, she practiced quietly, not committing fully to any single piece. She listened closely to how each note made her feel. Some made her tense. Others made her feel brave. She understood then that this moment was not really about music. It was about choosing whether to stay small or step forward, about trusting her own voice after years of doubt. When she finally closed her eyes and played the piece that felt right, something inside her settled. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. The music flowed naturally, like it had been waiting for permission. She stopped and sat in silence, heart beating fast. She didn't know how the audience would react. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, she felt ready. The simple advice echoed in her mind one last time. "Keep it simple," she breathed in slowly, knowing that sometimes the bravest thing was not keeping it simple at all. And with that quiet understanding, she prepared herself for what was coming next. The days leading up to the event were filled with small moments of tension and doubt. She woke each morning with a knot in her stomach, wondering if she had made the right choice. Everyone around her seemed to expect something ordinary. They didn't understand why she wanted more than what was safe and simple. Their words replayed in her mind constantly. "Don't do anything too difficult. Just play something safe. People won't like anything unusual." At first, she tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. Their concern felt heavy, and it pressed down on her in ways she hadn't expected. She spent hours with her instrument, testing different melodies. She tried the simple pieces she had learned long ago, the ones everyone would recognize. She played them perfectly, each note in place, but something was missing. The music sounded correct, but it had no soul. Her heart wasn't in it. Her fingers moved as if they were obeying someone else's will, not her own. She stopped and stared at the keys, frustrated. How could she show the world who she was if she only played what they wanted? She tried other pieces too, ones that were more complicated, that demanded every ounce of concentration and emotion she could give. When she played those, she felt alive. Each note seemed to speak for her, telling a story of quiet determination. Long nights alone, and the little victories no one ever noticed. But she also felt fear. Fear that no one would understand, that she would fail, that she would look foolish in front of the people who had warned her to keep it simple at work and school. She noticed how different people treated her when she was tense. Her friends would ask why she seemed distant. Teachers would glance at her and smile, unaware of the storm inside her mind. Some strangers would comment casually, never realizing that her mind was somewhere else entirely, counting melodies, imagining rhythms, testing chords she had never played in public. Life went on around her, normal and routine, while her thoughts spun endlessly about one decision. What would she play? The night before the performance, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, listening to the wind outside and the distant hum of the city. She thought about the people she had to face tomorrow, the eyes she would meet, the expectations she would try to navigate. The advice to keep it simple echoed in her mind again and again. It was meant to protect her, to save her from embarrassment. But it also felt like a cage. It reminded her of all the times she had stayed quiet, all the opportunities she had let slip away because she was afraid to take a risk. She got up and went to her instrument, running her fingers lightly over the keys. She played small notes, experimenting with new patterns. Some were bold and daring, others were quiet and soft. The room filled with sound, gentle at first, then stronger, more confident. She realized that each time she tried to hold back, the music felt empty. The only time it felt alive was when she let it flow freely, without worrying about approval, without trying to meet someone else's expectations. Morning came too quickly. She prepared herself slowly, each movement deliberate. She dressed in simple clothes, nothing flashy. She didn't need to impress anyone with her appearance. Her mind was focused on what she would play, the the choices she had made, and the courage she had gathered overnight. The nerves were still there, tight and insistent, but now they felt like part of her preparation, a reminder that she cared deeply about what she was about to do. The room where the event was held was small but welcoming. Chairs were arranged neatly, soft lights illuminated the space, and a few organizers moved quietly in the background. She took a deep breath and walked toward the instrument, feeling the weight of every eye that might fall on her. The people who had warned her about keeping it simple were there too, smiling politely, their expectations visible in their expressions. Some nodded as if to say, "Remember what we told you?" She nodded back, but her mind was elsewhere. She had decided she would not let fear dictate her performance. When it was her turn, she approached the instrument slowly, hands trembling slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the nights she had spent alone with the music. Each note had a story, a memory, a feeling that was uniquely hers. She reminded herself that the audience had no idea what she had been through. They didn't know the countless hours of practice, the quiet struggles, or the moments of doubt. They only expected something simple and safe, and she was going to give them something real. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. The audience listened quietly, unsure of what to expect. Slowly, the music grew stronger, more confident. Each chord carried emotion, each melody spoke a story. The notes rose and fell, expressing feelings words could not capture. She was no longer thinking about expectations or fear. She was thinking only about the music, letting it move through her and fill the room. She noticed subtle changes in the audience. Eyes widened slightly, whispers of curiosity replaced casual chatter, and some leaned forward, drawn into the sound. The room was no longer just a room. It had become a living space, filled with emotion, anticipation, and awe. Her fingers moved with purpose, guided by the feelings she had kept inside for so long. She realized that the risk she had feared was actually the key to connecting with others. By trusting herself, she had opened a door that no one could have predicted. When the piece ended, there was a moment of silence. It was not awkward or empty. It was filled with a profound sense of realization. The audience had been captivated by something unexpected. Then, slowly, applause began to fill the room. Not polite claps, but genuine, heartfelt acknowledgement. People stood, some with tears in their eyes, others simply nodding in quiet admiration. She sat there, catching her breath, amazed that her own heart was still racing, but in a different way now. It was excitement and relief combined. A recognition that she had done something true to herself. Afterward, people came to talk to her. They asked how she learned to play like that, what inspired her, and if she would perform again. Their curiosity was sincere, their admiration clear. She smiled and answered simply, not hiding the truth that she had spent years listening, practicing, and believing in herself even when no one else did. She didn't need to explain every detail because the music had already told the story. That day marked a turning point. She realized that the fear of judgment, the warnings to keep it simple, and the doubts she had carried for years could not stop her if she chose to be honest. It was not about proving anything to anyone else. It was about acknowledging her own strength, trusting her instincts, and embracing the music that had always been part of her. In the days that followed, she felt different. The world had not changed, but she had. She walked with a little more confidence, spoke with a little more clarity, and practiced with renewed passion. She knew that challenges would come, that some people might still advise caution, and that fear could appear again. But she also knew that she had faced her own hesitation and chosen to rise above it. That knowledge became a quiet, constant companion, guiding her through moments of doubt. The advice to keep it simple no longer felt like a limit. It was a reminder of how far she had come and how brave it had been to go beyond what was expected. She understood that simplicity had its place, but authenticity had its own power. By daring to be real, she had discovered a depth in herself and a connection with others that could not have been achieved any other way. And so, she continued her journey, carrying the memory of that performance with her. It was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new chapter where she would no longer let fear or expectation dictate her choices. She had learned that the truest form of courage was found in honesty, in embracing her own voice, and in daring to play the music that lived in her heart. After the performance, she felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. The applause and the attention were new experiences, yet they did not make her arrogant. Instead, they gave her a sense of clarity. She realized that for the first time, she had been fully herself in front of others, without hiding, without compromise. The feeling stayed with her, a quiet but steady glow inside, reminding her that courage and honesty could create moments of magic. She returned home that evening, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside. She sat at her instrument, not to practice, but to reflect. She replayed the performance in her mind, noticing how each note had traveled from her heart to the audience. She thought about the subtle expressions on their faces, the eyes that had widened in surprise, the slow realization that something real and unexpected was happening. She had been nervous, yes, but the music had guided her, and for the first time, she trusted that guidance completely. The next few days were filled with conversations she had never imagined. People approached her with curiosity and warmth, asking questions about her music, her inspiration, and how she had built such skill and confidence. Some were strangers, others acquaintances who had never spoken much before. They were drawn not just to her talent, but to her authenticity. Each conversation reminded her that people valued honesty, even when it was unexpected. Despite the encouragement, there were moments of doubt. She noticed the occasional skeptical glance or the whispered conversation about someone daring to go beyond simple expectations. Old fears crept in, the ones that had told her to stay small and safe. She felt them tug at the edges of her confidence, and she remembered how easy it had been to obey them in the past. For a moment she wondered if she had been reckless. She had overstepped and risked embarrassment, but the more she played, even privately, the more those doubts lost their grip. She started experimenting with new melodies, letting her emotions guide the rhythm and flow. She allowed herself to make mistakes, to hit wrong notes, to wander into unfamiliar chords. With each attempt, she discovered something new, not just about music, but about herself. She realized that growth required risk, that beauty often came from imperfection, and that the courage to be honest could outweigh any fear of failure. She also began to notice the small ways her environment had changed. Friends and colleagues listened more attentively, asking for her advice or opinion. People seemed to respect her presence more, not because she demanded it, but because she had chosen to show a part of herself that was genuine and unfiltered. Her confidence wasn't loud or brash. It was steady and quiet. It's like the foundation of a house that could withstand storms. The local event had become a turning point. But she understood that her journey was far from over. There were other opportunities, other performances, other moments where she would need to make choices. Each time, she would be faced with the decision to play it safe or to trust herself. The thought was daunting, yet it no longer paralyzed her. She knew that as long as she remained true to her voice, she could face whatever came next. As she practiced, she began to compose her own pieces. They were deeply personal, reflections of her experiences, fears, and triumphs. She didn't share them yet. Some were too intimate, too raw for others to hear, but they gave her a sense of control and purpose, a way to channel her emotions and connect with herself. Each composition became a piece of her identity, a tangible record of her growth and her willingness to embrace authenticity. She found that music was no longer just an escape, had become a form of expression, a way to communicate feelings that words could not capture. When she was nervous or uncertain, she played. When she felt joy or relief, she played. Music became her constant companion, guiding her through life's ups and downs, reminding her of the strength she had discovered within herself. Despite her private progress, she still faced challenges. Some people questioned her choices, wondering why she refused to stick to the safe and familiar. Others encouraged her, offering advice that balanced caution with inspiration. She learned to listen carefully, discerning which advice was valuable and which came from fear. Over time, she became adept at navigating expectations, staying true to her vision while respecting the perspectives of others. Her family noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. She carried herself with more confidence, spoke with more clarity, and seemed more at peace with herself. They didn't always understand the depth of her connection to music, but they saw that it made her happier and more fulfilled. Their acceptance was quiet but meaningful, a silent support that allowed her to continue growing without fear of judgment. She also discovered new sources of inspiration. She visited places she had never been, listened to different kinds of music, and observed the world around her more closely. Everyday sounds became a source of creativity, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of footsteps on pavement, the distant laughter of children. She realized that inspiration was everywhere, waiting to be noticed by those willing to listen. Through it all, she maintained a balance between humility and pride. She did not seek recognition for the sake of fame, nor did she perform to impress others. Her motivation was deeper, rooted in the desire to be authentic and to explore the full range of her abilities. This mindset allowed her to enjoy each moment of creation and performance, free from the pressure of external validation. As she looked ahead, she began to plan future performances. She considered venues, audiences, and the types of pieces she wanted to play. Each decision was deliberate, guided by her inner voice and her growing confidence. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that each step would present new challenges and opportunities. But she also knew that she had already overcome one of the most difficult obstacles, the fear of showing her true self in quiet moments. She reflected on how far she had come. The young woman who once hesitated to play beyond simple expectations had transformed into someone capable of embracing complexity, taking risks, and trusting her instincts. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Music had taught her this lesson, and she carried it with her in every aspect of her life by the end of this period. She felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond technical skill or public recognition. It was a profound understanding of herself, her values, and her capabilities. She had faced doubt, pressure, and fear, yet she had chosen honesty and authenticity over comfort and conformity. This realization gave her a quiet but unshakable strength, one that would guide her in all future endeavors. With renewed determination, she continued her journey, knowing that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but also with opportunities to express herself fully. She had learned the power of music, the importance of trust, and the courage it takes to remain true to oneself. Each day became a chance to explore, to create, and to grow. And with every note she played, she celebrated the journey she had undertaken and the person she had become. The day of her next performance arrived with a quiet intensity that she could feel in her chest. This time, the event was larger, with more people in the audience. The room was filled with chairs, softly lit, and she could hear the subtle hum of conversation as people settled in. Unlike before, the crowd was unfamiliar, with faces she did not recognize. The weight of expectation pressed down on her, but this time it felt different. It was not just the pressure of performing. It was the pressure of proving to herself that she could remain true under new circumstances. Backstage, she took a moment to breathe deeply. Her hands felt warm against the instrument, and she ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the familiar texture. Each note reminded her of the long nights she had spent practicing alone. The quiet determination that had carried her this far, she allowed herself a small smile. She had faced doubt before, and had come through stronger. She could do it again. When she stepped onto the stage, the room grew still. People quieted, sensing that something important was about to happen. She positioned herself carefully, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and let the memory of her past performances guide her. The first note rang out, soft and deliberate, like a whisper reaching the hearts of the audience. She let herself sink into the music, allowing it to flow naturally without restraint or hesitation. At first, some in the audience appeared surprised. They had expected something simple, as she had been advised, but they were met with something more complex and alive. The music carried emotion, telling stories of quiet struggles, hidden strength, and resilience. Her fingers moved with confidence, each key struck with intent, each chord resonating with honesty. It was as if the music had a life of its own, guiding her through the piece and beyond her fears. As she played, she noticed subtle changes in the room. People leaned forward in their seats, caught up in the unfolding melody. Eyes widened in astonishment, heads tilted slightly, listening more intently. The conversation and movement that had filled the room moments before had vanished. Everyone was absorbed, connected by a shared experience that transcended words. She realized that her choice to embrace authenticity had created this effect. She was no longer playing just for herself. She was connecting with others in a profound and meaningful way. The piece grew more dynamic as it progressed. Soft, delicate passages gave way to bold, sweeping chords that filled the room with sound. She allowed herself to express a full range of emotion, from tender vulnerability to passionate intensity. Each note carried meaning, each pause held anticipation. She could feel the energy of the audience responding, subtle yet powerful, reinforcing her confidence. This was a dialogue, not a performance. She was speaking, and they were listening. Midway through the piece, she felt a sudden wave of clarity. All the doubts, all the warnings to keep it simple, all the fear of judgment melted away. They no longer had any power over her. She was present, fully engaged in the moment, allowing the music to guide her. It was a revelation, a reminder that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. She played with a freedom she had never felt before, letting the music express truths she had kept hidden for years. The audience responded in ways she could not have predicted. Tears appeared on some faces, subtle nods of appreciation on others, and a few people simply sat in silence, absorbed by the beauty and honesty of the music. No one clapped prematurely. The room seemed suspended in a collective breath, waiting for the final note to arrive. It was a moment of connection that transcended spoken language, shared experience of human emotion and artistry. When the final note sounded, it lingered in the air like a gentle echo. For a heartbeat, there was silence, then a wave of applause erupted, sincere and enthusiastic. People rose to their feet, some clapping slowly, others cheering. The sound filled the room, washing over her, a validation not of skill alone, but of authenticity and bravery. She allowed herself to take it in, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and gratitude. She had dared to play her truth, and the audience had received it openly. After the performance, several people approached her. They asked how she had prepared, what inspired her music, and if she would perform again. Their curiosity and admiration were genuine. They were not interested in appearances or trends. They were drawn to the honesty and courage that radiated from her music. She answered with humility, explaining that her inspiration came from years of quiet practice, personal reflection, the choice to trust herself, even when others advised caution. They listened intently, appreciating the sincerity in her words. As the crowd dispersed, she found a quiet corner and reflected on the experience. The fear that had once held her back seemed like a distant memory. She understood now that every performance, every choice to embrace authenticity, was a step forward in her journey. The applause and admiration were gratifying, but the true reward was the realization that she could face her fears and express herself fully, without compromise, in the days following the performance. She noticed subtle but meaningful changes in herself. She walked with a new sense of confidence, spoke with more clarity, and approached challenges with calm determination. Her connection to music deepened further. As she began exploring new compositions and experimenting with complex arrangements, each attempt was a learning experience, a chance to push boundaries and discover new aspects of her abilities. She also became more attuned to the world around her. Everyday sounds, rain tapping against windows, footsteps echoing on streets. Birds singing at dawn became sources of inspiration. She noticed patterns, rhythms, and textures in the ordinary that she could translate into her music. This heightened awareness enriched her creativity and allowed her to connect more deeply with the emotions she wanted to convey. Despite the growth and recognition, she remained humble. She did not perform to seek praise or approval, but to honor her own journey and the story she wanted to tell through music. She understood that true artistry was about expressing genuine emotion, not chasing external validation. This mindset allowed her to remain grounded, focused, and motivated. Even as her audience and opportunities expanded, she also began mentoring others quietly. Sharing insights with those who were learning and struggling to find their own voice, she encouraged them to embrace authenticity, to take risks, and to trust their instincts. Her guidance was gentle, rooted in experience rather than theory, and it was well received. She realized that her journey was not just about personal growth, but also about inspiring others to believe in themselves. Through it all, she maintained a balance between ambition and self-awareness. She planned future performances thoughtfully, selecting pieces that reflected her evolving style and emotional depth. Each choice was intentional, guided by both her creative vision and the lessons she had learned about courage, authenticity, and the power of music. She understood that her path would continue to present challenges, but she was confident in her ability to navigate them with honesty and integrity. By the end of this period, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had faced larger audiences, more complex pieces, and higher expectations, yet she had remained true to herself. The experience reinforced her belief that authenticity and courage could create moments of connection and impact that went beyond skill alone. She had discovered not just the power of music, but the power of being fully present and genuine in everything she did. With each performance, each practice session, and each composition, she continued to grow. Her journey was ongoing, filled with new challenges, opportunities, and discoveries. Yet she faced it with confidence, knowing that she had already overcome the most important obstacle, the fear of being herself. The music, the courage, and the honesty that had guided her this far would continue to illuminate her path, inspiring both herself and those who had the privilege to listen. After the performance, she felt a mixture of calm and excitement that she had never experienced before. The applause was still echoing in her mind, not as a sound, but as a confirmation of her own belief. She realized that the real victory was not in impressing others, but in proving to herself that she could remain true to her own voice. That realization settled into her heart, steady and comforting, like the last note of a melody that lingers long after it has been played. In the following days, she found herself reflecting on her journey more deeply. She thought about the long nights she had spent alone with her music, the small victories no one ever saw, and the courage it had taken to step forward despite doubt and fear. Every practice session, every hesitation, every note played in secret had led to this moment. It was not just a performance, it was a testimony to her perseverance, her honesty, and her willingness to embrace herself fully. She began to notice changes in the people around her. Friends and acquaintances looked at her differently, not with envy, but with respect and admiration. Conversations shifted naturally toward her music and the effort she put into it. Some people sought her advice, curious about how she had managed to transform fear into expression. She answered gently, sharing her experiences and emphasizing the importance of honesty, practice, and trusting one's instincts. She realized that her journey had become a source of inspiration, not only for herself, but for those who witnessed her dedication and authenticity. Even with the newfound recognition, she remained grounded. She did not chase applause or approval. Instead, she focused on the music and the joy it brought her. Each practice session became an exploration, a dialogue with her own feelings and experiences. She experimented with new melodies, pushed herself to try complex pieces, and allowed mistakes to become part of her learning process. Every note, every pause, every variation was a reflection of her growth and commitment to her craft. Opportunities began to emerge naturally. Invitations to perform in other venues arrived, and each one presented a chance to test her skills and her courage. She approached these opportunities thoughtfully, choosing pieces that resonated with her and audiences that could appreciate authenticity. The focus was never on fame or recognition, but on sharing her story and emotions through music. She understood that the true measure of success was not in numbers or applause, but in the connection created between performer and listener. As she continued, she also found herself drawn to mentoring others. Young musicians and friends who struggled with doubt or fear sought her guidance. She shared her experiences, emphasizing the importance of practice, patience, and self-trust. She encouraged them to embrace challenges and to play with authenticity, showing them that courage was born from action, not from the absence of fear. She found fulfillment in helping others discover their voices. Recognizing that her journey could serve as an example and a source of encouragement, her family noticed subtle transformations as well. She carried herself with quiet confidence, spoke with more clarity, and radiated a calm determination that they had not seen before. They didn't always understand the depth of her connection to music, but they recognized the positive changes it brought to her life. Their support, often unspoken, reinforced her confidence and allowed her to continue pursuing her path with reassurance and peace. Through all of this, she maintained a deep awareness of her personal growth. Each performance, each practice, and each interaction became a lesson. She learned that courage was not a single act, but a continuous choice. She understood that vulnerability was not weakness but strength, and she realized that authenticity had the power to inspire, to connect, and to transform both the performer and the audience. As months passed, she noticed her music evolving. It was no longer just a series of notes or melodies. It was a reflection of her experiences, emotions, and insights. She began composing original pieces that told stories, conveyed feelings, and invited listeners into her world. The compositions were sometimes tender, sometimes bold, always honest. She took pride in this evolution, understanding that true artistry came from continuous growth, reflection, and a willingness to take risks. She also discovered new ways to connect with her audience. She learned to read their reactions, to feel their engagement, and to adjust the flow of her music accordingly. It was a subtle, intuitive dialogue that deepened her understanding of human connection. She realized that music could communicate what words often could not, bridging gaps between individuals and creating shared emotional experiences. This realization reinforced her commitment to authenticity and the importance of expressing her true self. Despite her successes, she remained mindful of the journey ahead. There were still challenges to face, moments of doubt, and new pieces to master. She understood that growth was continuous and that each performance was an opportunity to explore her limits and expand her abilities. She embraced these challenges with determination, knowing that the courage to face them had been built through years of practice, reflection, and self-trust. In quiet moments, she often reflected on how far she had come. The young woman who once hesitated to play beyond simple expectations had become a musician capable of conveying deep emotion, connecting with others and inspiring those around her. She had faced fear, doubt, and advice to stay small, and she had chosen to rise above them. That choice had transformed not only her music, but her life. Her story became a source of encouragement to many. People who had witnessed her journey began to believe in their own potential, understanding that authenticity and courage were attainable. She recognized that her path was not unique in its challenges, but it was unique in the way she embraced them. Her journey demonstrated that perseverance, honesty, and self-trust could create moments of beauty and impact that extended far beyond the individual. She continued to perform, to compose, and to mentor, always guided by the principles she had learned: courage, authenticity, and connection. She remained humble, knowing that each note was a chance to learn, to express, and to grow. She did not seek validation from the audience, only the satisfaction of knowing that she had shared her true self through her music. Over time, she realized that the lessons she had learned applied to every aspect of her life. Courage was needed not just in music, but in relationships, work, and personal growth. Authenticity mattered in all interactions, and self-trust was essential to making meaningful decisions. She carried these insights with her, using them to navigate challenges and embrace opportunities with confidence and clarity. In the end, the young woman who was once told to keep it simple had discovered that simplicity was not the goal. The true goal was honesty, courage, and the willingness to express oneself fully. Her music, her choices, and her journey reflected this truth. She had learned that fear could be overcome, that authenticity could inspire, and that the human spirit could shine brightly when given the chance. Her journey was not over. But she faced the future with confidence, knowing that she had already achieved something remarkable. She had played her truth, connected with others, and embraced her potential. Each performance, each composition, each moment of courage reinforced the understanding that being oneself was the greatest achievement of all. And with that knowledge, she stepped forward, ready for whatever lay ahead, guided by the music that had always been her voice, her strength, and her companion. As time passed, she continued to grow in ways she had never imagined. The music that had once been a private sanctuary now became a bridge between her and the world. She discovered opportunities to perform in new settings, smaller, intimate gatherings, outdoor spaces with natural acoustics, and community events that celebrated local talent. Each environment presented its own challenges and joys. She learned to adapt, to feel the room, and to play not just with her hands but with her intuition, letting the music guide her through unfamiliar situations. Despite her growing confidence, she remained humble. She remembered the early days when fear and doubt had held her back, when advice to keep things simple had seemed like chains around her creativity. Those memories grounded her, reminding her that every accomplishment was built on the quiet, persistent work of dedication and courage. She knew that to remain true to herself, she had to continue practicing, learning, and exploring, never settling for easy success or superficial recognition. One afternoon, she received an invitation to participate in a local festival known for showcasing emerging artists. It was an opportunity that excited her and made her nervous in equal measure. The audience would be larger, the expectations higher, and the pressure undeniable. Yet she felt ready. She knew that the success of her previous performances had not been about skill alone. It had been about honesty and connection. She decided to approach this new challenge with the same mindset, trusting that her authenticity would resonate in the days leading up to the festival. She spent long hours experimenting with new compositions. She blended melodies she had created over the years with fresh ideas inspired by recent experiences. She tested different harmonies, tried unconventional arrangements, and let her emotions dictate the flow. At times, frustration crept in when notes didn't sound right or ideas seemed incomplete, but she welcomed it as part of the process. Every misstep was an opportunity to learn. Every moment of uncertainty a chance to deepen her understanding. The day of the festival arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Performers and audiences filled the space, each contributing to a shared sense of excitement. She felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but quickly reminded herself that fear was natural, and it did not have to control her. She took a deep breath, centering herself, and walked toward her instrument. Ready to share her music with those who were waiting, as she began to play, the crowd quieted instantly. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but as she settled into the rhythm, the music grew bolder and more expressive. She let herself feel every emotion, the excitement, the nerves, the joy, and the calm determination, and translated them into sound. Each note became a word, each chord a sentence, telling a story that went beyond words. Speaking directly to the hearts of those listening, she noticed subtle reactions in the audience. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes focused and attentive. Some closed their eyes, lost in the music, while others smiled softly, touched by the sincerity of the performance. She felt a powerful connection forming, an invisible thread that linked her emotions with theirs. The room, once filled with chatter and anticipation, was now immersed in shared experience. United by the authenticity of her music, midway through her set, she decided to take a risk. She introduced a new, more complex piece she had been experimenting with. It was unfamiliar even to her, challenging and unpredictable. Her hands moved carefully, guided by intuition rather than habit. As she played, she felt her heart pounding, a mix of fear and exhilaration. Yet, with each note, the music became more fluid, more alive, and she realized that taking risks was essential to growth. The audience responded with curiosity and admiration, their attention unwavering, their connection deepening when the final note echoed through the festival space. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, absorbing the beauty and intensity of what had just been shared. Then, a wave of applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than any she had experienced before. People cheered, some whistled, and others clapped with uncontained excitement. She felt a rush of gratitude and relief, not for the recognition, but for the validation of her own courage, authenticity, and persistence. She had dared to push herself further, and it had resonated,